truly believes that he's the Son of God.
Guns and a guru.
So there'll be no excuses.
He wanted to have as many people killed in that compound as possible.
Today, it exploded. Armageddon came to the Branch Davidians.
We were doing what we thought was best to try to prevent this tragedy from occurring.
It was the family's worst fear. And tonight, the questions burn in the ashes outside of Waco. What about the children? Did it have to end this way?
David Koresh said he played the game. He never intended to come out. It was all a game.
This is a CBS News special report. Reckoning in Texas. Good evening, I'm Dan Rather. It was beginning to look as if the standoff between federal agents and that group of religious fanatics in Central Texas might last an eternity. But today, the siege came to a sudden and horrible end. Apparently, a mass suicide. The leader of the cult claimed all along to be taking orders directly from heaven. But it was David Koresh himself who apparently gave the order that turned the cult compound into a scene from hell, with more than 90 people holed up inside, including 25 children and 2 pregnant women. Followers of Koresh set fire to the compound. The flames spread quickly. Tonight, all that's left of the compound on the hill is a smoldering pile of ashes. As many as 86 people, including Koresh, are presumed dead. Only 9 people are known to have survived. The FBI is defending and explaining its decision to pump tear gas into the compound this morning in what turned out to be an unsuccessful attempt to force a peaceful end to the standoff. And Congress, led by Republicans but not confined to Republicans, the Congress is planning investigations into the entire affair and how it was handled by federal agencies. The standoff lasted 51 days. CBS News correspondent John Roberts shows you how the final day began and ended.
Shortly before dawn at the Branch Davidian compound, cult members got a wake-up call.
Branch Davidian member Steve Snyder was telephonically contacted and advised that the FBI would begin shortly to insert tear gas into the compound. Snyder immediately hung up the phone.
As the sun came up, the first M60 combat engineering vehicle punched a hole in the cult's building, pouring tear gas into the complex.
It's not an indication that our patience has run out. The action was taken today.
Why now? Why did they have to go in the way they...
Somehow managed to escape the inferno yesterday. You have had a chance to talk with him. What has he told you?
He hasn't been able to tell me an awful lot, Paula, because, you know, we haven't been in touch with each other for some time. And primarily, I just wanted to establish voice contact with him, to let him know that I was here as he knew I was here. And he wasn't able to say a lot. He did say that it was horrible, that they were engulfed with smoke. It was hard to know where to go, you know, where to run, what to do. And somehow, miraculously, beyond description, he managed, along with his friend Jamie, one of the other musicians in the group, to walk out of the compound while it was ablaze.
Did he have a chance to tell you anything about what David Koresh had said to anybody to convince them to stay in the compound once it was under siege?
The people were very firm in their loyalty and their respect for David, for the community, and for their biblical ideology. I'm not sure what David said. I'm not sure how the whole ending unfolded, but it was very, very much what David said was going to happen, that the federal government was going to set itself upon them and that it was going to end up disastrous.
Federal authorities, Brenda, of course, are saying that 2 cult members set the compound on fire. Was Davey able to tell you whether he believed this was, in fact, part of a mass suicide?
No, he did not comment at all in that regard. And I hope as time goes by, I will be able to talk to him more. It's an awful lot to ask someone who has just walked out of a burning building in which 90 of the people they have loved for a couple of years in their life have just perished.
Do you believe, Brenda, this was a planned mass suicide?
No, I don't believe it was. I think that there's an awful lot to discover about this. A lot of mistakes were made. And I think that the fear and the anger was so prevalent that it may have forced a very destructive hand, but we don't know. We don't really know what happened. I know that they were scared to death. I know that when their compound was bombarded by the tank, when tear gas was thrown into the compound, that must have created such a panic, such a fear. I'm sure people didn't really know what to think or how to react. This was a very forceful, militaristic procedure, and as you realize, Paula, I've said it many times, the families believe that this could have been averted if they would only have given us the opportunity to try.
Ruth and Lyle, I know this is a difficult time for your family as well. Your daughter Sherry has not been found. Do you hold out any hope that she may in fact be found alive?
I guess I still am hopeful that they must have had an underground tunnel that I've been hearing about, and we won't know until they go in and find out.
Lyle, what went through your mind yesterday as you watched these pictures unfold live on television?
A complete horror. We were notified about the tanks at 5:30 in the morning by Kathy of CBS, and she's been so helpful, and I was called by my granddaughter at 7:30, and she said, quick, turn on television, and my granddaughter from Michigan, and so that's when we found out.
Lyle, Belinda was talking earlier about the sense of commitment members had to David Koresh. Do you believe that your daughter was a victim of David Koresh, that he misled her in any way?
Oh, no, I don't think so. She was a very rational person, and she could make up her own mind. We think it's tragic, though, the way the FBI has handled this thing, as far as not letting the relatives try to talk to him and talk him out of this situation.
Belinda, we only have 15 seconds left. Attorney General Janet Reno actually offered her resignation at one point yesterday. Should she resign?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, Belinda.
Paula, I think what's important here is that, what I think is very important is that the government and the federal agencies come to understand that you cannot always use a military tactic in every single situation you go into. They needed to consider another tactic, a tactic that exists and has been proven to be effective, and it was a tactic they refused to look at this point in time, and the result we have is 90 tragic, horrifying deaths.
Of course, the Attorney General has said that she has considered a number of actions, that waiting him out was not a good alternative, but they never expected to happen what happened yesterday.
That's beside the point, Paula. Cult awareness professionals, people who have lived in these groups, families have written, we sent faxes, we sent letters, we gave information, we offered ourselves in negotiations with the FBI. We never asked to take the procedure over. We offered to assist, we offered to work together, we offered to put a body of people together who knew potentially how to turn this thing around, and we were not considered. There was never a task force for families. We had to eke every bit of information out of the authorities, personally, individually, through unrelenting effort.
Belinda Gainham.
That's where the problem is.
Belinda Gainham, Ruth and Lyle Mosher, thank you all for joining us this morning. Harry?
Just about 17 minutes after the hour. Much more to come on CBS This Morning on the tragic end of the siege of Waco. Next, inside the mind of cult leader David Koresh.
Those are some statements in there that might make you a little bit happy. Okay?
Hey, high school seniors, life's pretty cool right now. It's graduation and prom time. You're a success story just waiting to happen. You could become a fatality if you or someone else doesn't commit to the prom promise. Think about it. Then write about it in WYOU's Creative Writing Contest. Ask your teacher or call WYOU for details. You could be the big winner of a $2,000 scholarship. This contest is brought to you by WYOU and AFSCME Council 13, who know real winners don't drink and drive.
There may never be a better time to test drive a new Buick Century, the safest family sedan on the road and one of the top 10 in the J.D. Power Study. Because of a special program, if you buy the Century Special with a Prestige option package, you'll get an incredible amount of equipment for just $26. Just $26 for all of this standard and optional equipment. See your Buick dealer today for this limited time special $26 options offer on the Buick Century. 26 more great reasons Buick is quality you can definitely afford.
Symbol on your...
It's 17 after the hour. It was the outcome that law enforcement officials most wanted to avoid. Approximately 86 people feared dead, including as many as 24 children. But was yesterday's tragedy in Waco, in fact, avoidable? Could the FBI have done anything differently that may have saved more lives? In the next few days, the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Civil and Constitutional Rights, which has jurisdiction over the FBI, will be holding hearings to assess the FBI's handling of the Waco siege. Representative Henry Hyde is the subcommittee's ranking Republican, and he joins us now from Washington. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
There are a lot of questions this morning, not a lot of answers. What troubles you most about yesterday's tragedy?
Well, I think the worst possible result occurred, and nobody wants to second-guess the Attorney General or the Justice Department or certainly the FBI, the premier law enforcement agency in the whole world. But there are so many questions that really need answers. The American people want to know whether this was the only alternative, the best alternative, the best option. Whether we just ran out of patience, as it would superficially seem to be the case, whether we just couldn't outwait them. I understand there was only one hostage rescue team and that they had reached a near exhaustion. There must be a question as to why we don't have sufficient backup. What happens if we have two hostage problems at either end of the country? Are we not equipped to deal with that? So many questions that I think have to be asked, and only the answers can come from the people directly involved.
But how comprehensive can an investigation be when there is only one side left to tell the story?
Well, I don't think there's only one side left to tell the story. We just heard the two attorneys who represented some of the Davidians, the leaders, and there are some survivors. We hope some of those can be available to give testimony, but everybody knows what happened. We saw on television what happened. We can make inquiry of the judgment calls that were made and whether they were the most appropriate under the circumstances. If we just ran out of patience, I think that probably was a mistake. We should have been able to outweight them. But again, it's so easy to, with hindsight, to be critical. But I just think the questions have to be asked, and we need to get straight answers, and I'm sure we will.
You mentioned you didn't want to second-guess the officials in charge, but in effect, won't this be perceived as a way to pin the blame on somebody? Attorney General Reno, possibly FBI Director Sessions?
Well, I don't think you need to go either way. I don't think you need to cover up if somebody made a profound error in judgment. After all, some 86 people have died in this Holocaust. Were there errors in judgment made? If there were, we ought to find out so they can be avoided. The purpose of this is not so much to affix blame as to learn something. When our Marines were bombed in Lebanon and they were all killed because they were in one place, and I think there was inadequate guarding of the perimeter, we ought to have learned something from that. I hope we learned something from this.
President Clinton signed off on yesterday's siege. How responsible is he in all of this?
Well, I don't think you can blame the president. The president has to rely on the best advice he can get from competent people, and the same thing is true of the Attorney General. I think the people on the scene were highly professional. We assume they knew what they were doing, but whether there were circumstances or inadequate resources that were constraining them is something we ought to look at. I'm particularly concerned on whether we are inadequately staffed in terms of hostage rescue, trained personnel? Did we have only one team, and when they reached the point of exhaustion, did we have to give up? I don't know. I want to ask those questions.
Congressman, some of the families pleaded to set up a committee of family members to talk to Koresh and the cult members, and yet that was denied by the FBI.
From this point, and not asking those questions and getting the answers, it would seem to me to be a mistake. It would seem that the families would be the most likely people to have influence over the people inside. Did we just run out of patience? Were we exasperated and exhausted by the whole thing? These are questions we need answers to.
Congressman Hyde, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Good Morning America continues. Please stay with us.
If it were jewelry, it would probably be pearls. If it were a flower, what else but a rose? If you wore it, it would be classic blue denim. But it's a floor called Mannington Gold, a floor built on the principle that if it starts beautiful, it should stay beautiful for years and years to come. In fact, we guarantee it. Mannington Gold, the look that lasts.
Where'd you get those? Where'd you get those curls? These are the curls, girls. Caruso curls. Salon perfect curls that stay bouncy all day. With the Caruso molecular hair setter, moisturizing steam gives you long-lasting curls and waves, gently, quickly, easily, without damage from hot curlers and irons. So have your Caruso curls and keep them all day with the Caruso molecular hair setter.
Come on and nutricize your body. Come on, nutricize. Nutricize your mind.
Want to change your old size for a Nutrisize? Call Nutrisystem. We'll teach you how to create a whole new relationship with food.
Nutricize your life.
Lose all the weight you want by Memorial Day for $29 plus the cost of meals. Hurry, do it now. Call 1-800-321-THIN.
Guys, get a whiff of this. What? Oh, that's very nice.
It's like a petunia. What makes Breath Savers so special?
Hey, Georgie, come here, quick. Get a whiff of this. All right, what do you think?
Breath Savers, with its cool, minty core, gives you the ultimate fresh breath.
What are you doing? Just taking a breather.
Breath Savers with the core.
We are the 3rd grade class of Pringle Street School, and we want to say, Good morning, Pennsylvania!
Proud to serve Northeastern and Central Pennsylvania. This is WNEP TV 16, the news station.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris McCabe. It's 7:25, Tuesday, April 20th. And this morning, state investigators will start looking into the death of an elderly woman who suffocated at a personal care home in Luzerne County. As Newswatch 16's Barbara Barr reports, investigators are focusing on a type of restraining device used on the woman.
It was a restraining device similar to this one that caused 74-year-old Anna Potter's death. It's called a posy. Hospitals and nursing home employees sometimes use them on patients. This one is shaped like a belt. The one Potter was wearing looked more like a vest or bib.
A posy is a restraint that looks almost like a bib, a child's bib, that is put on the entire body, the front of the body, and is used solely and exclusively as a restraint.
State police in Shikshini found Potter dead at the Colonial Estate Personal Care Center around 6:30 Sunday night. The Luzerne County coroner performed an autopsy on Potter. The coroner says she died of asphyxiation.
The manner of death is still under investigation because of all of the rules and regulations that govern nursing homes and personal care centers and what these facilities are supposed to do and not supposed to do.
The DA's office. He says it's time the West takes military action to put a stop to it. We'll talk to him about the possibilities in this half hour. Katie?
Right. Prison guard Tony Demons was released as a hostage last week by rioting inmates at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville. And he says the uprising is largely the result of racist attitudes among white members of the prison staff. We'll talk to Mr. Demons in this half hour in his first TV interview since his release.
Okay, 7 7:31. Let's go to the news desk. And Margaret Larson. Good morning, Margaret.
Good morning, Bryant and Katie. Good morning, everyone. Near Waco, Texas this morning, a grim search for the victims of the tragedy that engulfed a religious cult. The compound of the Branch Davidians was destroyed by a wind-whipped fire after federal agents tried to force its residents out with tear gas. As many as 86 people died in those flames, 17 of them children younger than 10 years old. Dick DeGuerin is the lawyer who represented David Koresh and the Branch Davidians in a month and a half of negotiations with federal officials. Earlier this morning, he told Bryant there had been clear signs that the ordeal could end peacefully and that there had been no need for agents to raid the compound on Monday.
Not a single shot was fired since February the 28th. Not a single person was injured since February the 28th. We had in writing from David his promise as soon as he was finished with his manuscript that he was coming out, and that wasn't going to take very long. Why not wait?
The nagging question for federal officials, could it have ended differently? And for Attorney General Janet Reno, an even more pointed question, given what happened, would she resign, even if what happened was not entirely her fault?
If that be the case, if that's what the president wants, I'm happy to do so. But I think in these situations, what's done is if somebody makes the best judgment they can, if they review everything carefully, if they are accountable to the people, if they proceed in an open and accountable way, people will know what they have tried to do, the reason they have tried to do it. And in this situation, I don't think anybody has ever dealt with a David Koresh who would purposely set people afire.
Earlier Monday, she called it one of the toughest days of her career and certainly one of the very most painful and saddest. The state of South Dakota is in mourning today after...
She also says she advised President Clinton of her plan of action and that he gave his okay. It does appear to some the president is distancing himself some from that decision, saying only that he told the Attorney General to do what she thought was best. It is a decision that Mr. Clinton says he stands by. In other news this morning...
Koresh's grandmother, when Good Morning America continues.
Home alone.
But a grandmother's love and prayers were not enough. And she joins us now from our affiliate KTRK in Houston with her lawyer, James Brannon. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate what you're going through right now, Mrs. Holub. You know, it was very painful to watch yesterday as you watched as the compound burned. What was going through your mind at that time?
Well, honey, it was the saddest thing I ever saw. I just thought, well, they finally did it, one way or the other. There was no need for it. I felt like that he was trying to finish his 7 seals, and they knew that. And they made fun of him. He was made fun of about his spelling, which he didn't have much of an education, but he got the best he could get. And I think that was very wrong. I think they should have waited instead of doing this thing yesterday.
Are you angry at the officials?
I think I am, very.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had anger in my life, but at this point, I do, because, you know, this wondering why it's really shook me up.
Mm-hmm. You know, I've been reading that David, whom you call Vernon Howell, told his other grandmother that he wasn't afraid to die, that in fact, he said, I'll be resurrected. Had you talked to him about dying?
No, I hadn't, but, you know, he's very religious. He studied this Bible, and, you know, if that's the way it was, I guess he wasn't. Maybe he had a peaceful feeling with God. You know, but I do know that he really studied.
They're calling this a suicide.
No. No doubt in my mind it's not. No, he wasn't suicidal. Not the one I knew.
James, let me ask you, what is the next step for the family, for Mrs. Holland?
Well, honey, I don't really know right now. I don't know. It's going to take a while to kind of get, you know, over this, if I ever do.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows how hurt I was, because I've sat up there day in and day out begging to go see him. And I thought maybe after Mr. DeGuerin come out, you know, and didn't get to bring him out, I felt sure each day if I could go in there, he would come out. I was planning on telling him, let me bring his children out, you know. I could take care of a bunch of them. But I didn't get that chance, and now I'm wondering why. It's very hurtful.
Did you ever get another chance to talk to him?
No. No, the more I begged and asked, and I even made 2 tapes, and then the FBI lady told my attorney that he didn't, you know, they weren't sent in to him. In other words, I feel like they just cut me out altogether, which was very wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt like that the people could do more with their people to get them to, you know, come out than anybody.
Were you warned of what was going to happen yesterday before it happened?
I felt it. I don't know. I had to come home, take care of some bills, you know, and things that I really need to take care of, and taxes and all, but all this happened. I really didn't get to do anything, but yes, I felt like it because all that noise and stuff, you know, going on all the time was bad enough, but then this had to be done.
Well, we're going to give you some peace and quiet, and we certainly appreciate you joining us this morning, Mrs. Hollab, and Mr. Brannon, you as well.
Thank you, Dana.
Well, why it ended the way it did, a view from former FBI and other federal officials when Good Morning America continues here on ABC.
Appropriate one in the minds of the Congress, and lay out for the American people why they decided to do what they did and what in fact actually transpired inside the building to the extent that they know it.
One other quick note, as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, you are also overseer of the drug war.
Yes.
What can you tell us about the administration's new drug czar? Is it going to be former New York Police Commissioner Lee Brown?
I'm not at liberty to do that, Bryant, as you well know, but I like Lee Brown a lot. I think Lee Brown would be very, very capable. I've indicated to the administration I think he's fully capable of doing the job, would be first rate.
Okay. Senator Joseph Biden, thanks so very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to come on back in just a moment.
The Reverend Jerry Falwell here on religion and cults.
Inferno, including some 17 children. Our coverage begins with Sandra Hughes, who is standing by outside what is left of the cult compound. Good morning, Sandra.
Good morning, Paula. With daylight begins the newest challenge, sifting through the rubble looking for bodies and evidence after yesterday's federal assault on the compound, which ended when cult members caught their own religious sanctuary on fire, killing as many as 86 people. Within an hour, the wooden buildings had been destroyed. Firefighters weren't allowed in until the shooting had ended, and by then it was too late. Only 9 people of the 95 inside escaped. FBI officials said they had hoped their slow and nonviolent approach would have prevented so many deaths.
We always have regrets when human life is lost. What we do not regret is that we believe that this thing had to be brought to a logical conclusion at some point.
The FBI says it's believed that all of the 17 children inside died, possibly before the fire was even set, put to death by lethal injection. A former wife of David Koresh says she isn't surprised he would take the children with him as part of the mass suicide pact.
He believes that they're all going to come back. He believes that they're going to be resurrected, and that since he is God, his children are God's children. They're perfect. They're God's seed, and they're going to repopulate the earth with this seed when they come back. And these children will be special children because they're martyrs for God.
Now, federal officials say the last act of David Koresh was a lie, making assurances to other cult members that the children inside the compound were in a safe and protected area. Paula?
Sandra, what could you tell us about the 9 people who managed to get out yesterday?
Well, Paula, 4 of those are still in area hospitals being treated for injuries sustained during the fire. 5 of those members, male members, are jailed this morning, being held as material witnesses.
Sandra Hughes reporting from outside Waco, Texas this morning. Thank you.
Attorney General Jana Reno says she will take the heat for the Waco tragedy and even resign if necessary. Law correspondent Rita Braver is standing by in Washington with more on the federal fallout from the tragedy. Good morning, Rita.
Good morning, Harry. That's right. There is no question that the biggest law enforcement action of the new Clinton administration can only be described as a disaster. And it is bound to raise a lot of questions about the president's leadership. Early yesterday, Mr. Clinton appeared trying to distance himself from the whole thing, acknowledging that he had been made aware of the operation, but telling reporters to talk to the Justice Department and the FBI about it. Later, the White House said that the president did accept responsibility for the Waco raid, but it was Attorney General Janet Reno who stepped forward at a Justice Department news conference.
I made the decision. I'm accountable. The buck stops with me, and nobody ever accused me of running from a decision that I made based on the best information that I had.
Reno said every contingency was considered. She said these are the hardest decisions to make.
Obviously, if I thought the chances were great of a mass suicide, I would never have approved the plan. Everything that we were told, every indication of the reactions to the pressure up to that point was that that would not occur.
Already there are a number of calls for a major congressional investigation into how the whole operation was carried out. Most observers believe that the Waco incident was doomed to come to a tragic end once the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms bungled its first assault back in February. But a round of second-guessing has already started about why more than a month later the FBI and the Justice Department gave up waiting and forced a situation that ended in carnage, Harry.
Rita Braver, Jana Reno has said she will resign. Is that likely to happen?
Well, you know, this is a city that loves a scapegoat, but so far people are pretty impressed with her dignity in accepting the responsibility for this. And the truth is that the White House has so far been very, very proud of how she has stood up to this and some other incidents that have happened in the past. So I think unless this investigation shows something that no one is expecting, she will be around.
Rita Braver in Washington this morning. Thanks. After the news, we're going to talk with Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Joe Biden.
Moving up on
smoke, even if they escaped the flames, unless they had an airtight underground chamber with air pumped in from a fresh source far away from the compound, I don't think it's likely anyone is still left below. There was concertina wire strung all around the compound. The FBI finished this wiring last week. This was to prevent anybody fleeing the compound from being able to run out into the prairie around us here. Highly unlikely anyone besides the 9 who escaped yesterday survived. 5 of those people are in jail and will be arraigned today on charges possibly including murder related to the shootout with the ATF on February 28th. Donna?
Brian Jenkins from Waco, Texas. Thank you very much. Bob?
Now nearly 7 minutes past the hour. We are joined this morning by the 2 attorneys who represented the leaders of the Branch Davidians. Dick DeGuerin was hired by David Koresh's mother to represent him. DeGuerin met on several occasions with Koresh inside the compound during the standoff. Jack Zimmerman was the attorney for Steve Schneider, Koresh's lieutenant. Both attorneys join us from the conference room at the Hilton Hotel in Waco, Texas this morning. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. DeGuerin, will you please think back to 24 hours ago and give us your best recollection, your honest reaction when you first saw the FBI in its campaign to try to dislodge the cult members from the compound?
I was very concerned. I was shocked that they were doing that. I thought we had an agreement that we were going to wait this out and they were going to come out peacefully. I immediately made arrangements to come down here. I called the FBI and told them I was on my way down and I was willing to do anything to help to calm the situation down, to go back in if that was necessary, if they felt it was necessary. And then on the way down between Denton and Denton and Waco, I heard about the fire.
Are you both sure your clients are dead?
Well, we're as sure as you can be. I don't see how anyone could have survived after that, and there's no indication that they have.
Mr. Zimmerman, what is your status now? Is there some possibility you might represent the estate of your client?
There's always that possibility, but we really haven't talked about it. This is a tragedy for everybody, but particularly for the Schneider family, because not only did I represent Steve, but my partner Jim Levine represented Judy, his wife, and of course there was a child that was lost as well. So there were 3 in the family that we represented that were lost yesterday.
Will you tell us, Mr. Zimmerman, who was your client exactly? Stephen Schneider, of course, but we don't know him. And as the affair wore on, he seemed to emerge as at least as truculent a personality as David Koresh.
Steve was an articulate, educated, intelligent person, and apparently it fell to his lot to be the one who was the point of contact with the FBI for most of the negotiations. I met with him for about a total of 15 hours, and I found him to be a totally sincere, completely rational person who was neat in his appearance, clean, well-groomed, and totally in control of himself.
This is, I think, Mr. DeGuerin, an uncomfortable position for all of us to be in, post-morteming, as it were, yesterday's events so soon after them. But I have to ask some of the hard questions. One,
Sure.
Who killed 86 people in Texas yesterday?
You have to look at the beginning of this. This was an operation that was poorly planned, poorly conceived, poorly executed. There was no reason for those agents to go in like Marines storming the beach on February the 24th. And there was no reason for 4 agents to have died. There were 6 people that were killed on February the 28th that were Branch Davidians. So there was no reason for that to happen. It shouldn't have happened that way in the very beginning. And yesterday, I don't understand why we couldn't have waited and let this thing play itself out peacefully instead of provoking the actions of yesterday. It was a bad decision. I don't think anyone wanted this to happen. I don't think the
Play
agents...
itself out peacefully. For how long?
I don't know how long it would have taken, at least a week or two, but I'm convinced that it would have had it not been so provoked yesterday, played out peacefully. That's what I thought we had an agreement to do.
Let me follow up, if I might. Dick made the comment about this event on the 28th of February being like the Marines storming ashore. As a former Marine commander, I want you to know that the Marines would not have done an operation the way the ATF did it. It was botched from the beginning. It had poor planning, poor execution, and the poor overall operation is not something that we're going to find when the facts come out. It's something that the American public is going to want to stand for.
I agree.
Are you gentlemen contending that the way the affair began is what caused yesterday's tragedy?
Well, you can't put the finger on any one cause. It certainly never should have happened. We never should have been in this situation. You don't storm a building that has 100 people, among them women and children, with a SWAT team. That's just any paramilitary expert, any police expert will tell you that's not done. The only thing I can think of is that it was done for show purposes because the head of the ATF was to appear before the Appropriations Committee, the House, on March 10th and to try to justify the existence of this paramilitary unit. Why else would this have happened? History shows us that David Koresh, when charged with even more serious offenses than they were investigating, voluntarily turned himself in and stood before the bar of justice.
All right, let's go back closer to the present now, to yesterday once again, to what happened yesterday. FBI Director William Sessions said again this morning that you had both been assured, absolutely assured by your clients, that suicide was not in the plans, not in the cards. First, is that true?
That's correct, but that all changed yesterday morning when the tank started tearing holes in the walls, and ripping out the windows in the children's rooms and forcing tear gas in there. That's a terrible thing to do. I think it was a mistake to do it that way. I think that the agents that made that decision now realize that they made a mistake, and I'm glad that we have an Attorney General that wants to take responsibility for it. I just hope there isn't a cover-up.
Gentlemen, if you'll both stay right there, we need to talk some more, and we will after a brief break. We are talking with the 2 attorneys who represented the leader of the Branch Davidian cult and his chief lieutenant, Jack Zimmerman. It is likely, is it not, that not all the people who died yesterday at the compound died willingly?
Well, we don't know that. Of course, you know, you had 17 children, and I don't know that they could make a decision or not. But can I follow up something, Bob, from just before the break?
Yes, but if you'll hold just a second, some people escaped, got out intentionally, saved their lives. So clearly there were some who did not want to die.
Well, yes, and of course we don't know whether it was a mass suicide or not at this point. That's the whole point. The facts are not in yet. I don't think we can judge that. People need to talk to those who did survive yesterday.
Okay.
But that brings up the point I wanted to follow. Yes, Judge Sessions was right. Dick DeGuerin and I went in after the botched ATF raid. And we tried to assure our clients that they would be treated fairly. They needed to take their fight to the courthouse. I think we succeeded in that, and we did pass on to the FBI. They said they would not commit suicide. They said that this would be resolved peacefully. We passed that on. But things changed on yesterday morning. Things changed. The FBI knew that David Koresh viewed those tanks out there, for example, as chariots of fire. He knew that. They knew about the prophecies. And what happened, what changed is that a tank ran through the front door, knocked down the front door, and went halfway into their living room, then backed out, and a turret knocked down the walls to the children's bedroom. And if you notice, look at the tapes, you'll find that within seconds of that tank entering the house, you began to see puffs of smoke. So we don't know what was going on inside there. We don't know if that was a reaction. All we know is that the people on the inside had been assured by us that they would not be attacked and that they would be treated fairly. And I am convinced that it would look like an attack to someone on the inside when a tank rolls through your front door.
All right, to our viewers, I'd have to note that the pictures we were looking at while you were speaking, Mr. Zimmerman, were not the specific one you referred to, the one that immediately preceded the fire. Mr. DeGuerin, the New York Times, in an editorial sharply critical of the government's handling of this case, nevertheless referred to David Koresh as demented. If we, for the sake of discussion, grant that characterization, then doesn't any course of action become very iffy?
Well, even if you grant everything bad that they say about David Koresh, and what happened yesterday was indefensible, still, that doesn't justify what happened on February the 28th with the ATF raid, and it doesn't justify the use of the massive escalation of force yesterday that was calculated only to anger, inflame, and bring to a head exactly what they said, the events. Why bring it to a head? It was resolving itself peacefully. There hadn't been a shot fired since February the 28th.
What was it like inside the compound when you two met with Schneider and Koresh when you were in there? What room were you in? What was the atmosphere?
It was Spartan. We went into a room that was basically 2 doors away from the front door. It was windowless. We were lit by Coleman lanterns, and we spent hours in that room. We also spent time touring the inside of the buildings and learning the facts as best we could in the limited time that we had available. It was their home, and it was decorated as their home, not with fancy decorations, but you could see the care and the love and that people lived there. That was their home.
Final question, did either of you happen to notice while you were inside the building whether any of the dormitories or the living quarters had doors that could be locked from the outside?
No, we didn't see anything like that. In fact, most of them didn't look like they had doors that could be locked at all. The women and children, for the most part, lived upstairs, and the men lived downstairs. And that's what particularly disturbed me yesterday when I saw those battering rams going into the children's rooms.
All right, Mr. DeGuerin, Mr. Zimmerman, thank you both for talking with us.
Thank you.
Don.
Coming up, reactions to the end of the cult standoff and calls for a federal investigation of the long siege and its final hours.
I think it is impossible to evaluate the wisdom of what the FBI did. And I think we will have to await the events to cool off, both figuratively and literally, to take a look at it.
To end the standoff in Waco, Texas.
The FBI in this situation has shown remarkable restraint. I think they did not lose their patience. I think they carefully thought this out, developed it as part of a coherent and continuing plan with the certain knowledge that in some instances these issues are the hardest decisions to make in the world. I think they made the best, most informed decision they could under the circumstances.
Some lawmakers are calling for a full investigation. Joining us now from Washington this morning is Senator Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee who has called for hearings on the standoff and its violent end. Good morning, Senator Specter.
Good morning, Donna.
I know that a lot of folks, including you, have called for an investigation. Does it seem to you that it's a pretty safe bet that there will be hearings and a full investigation, and how soon do you think that might happen?
I think that there will be an inquiry by the Senate Judiciary Committee. We have oversight. I'm not sure how soon it will start, but I hope very promptly. It's a call for the chairman, Senator Biden. But our committee has oversight to make decisions on how much we spend for intelligence. We need to take a look at the quality of the intelligence. We need to take a look at the reasons for the use of the tear gas yesterday. From the preliminary news reports, it appears that the cult members really outweighed the federal authorities, and there are a great many questions, I think, which have to be answered.
And you have hit on some of the major questions, Senator Specter. Dick DeGuerin, who's David Koresh's attorney, was on with us just a few minutes ago. You may have been able to hear him.
I saw Mr. DeGuerin.
He said, I thought we had an agreement to wait things out. Is that one of the questions you'll be looking at, to see if an agreement was broken?
Well, I think that with Mr. DeGuerin having said it, we will make that inquiry. I am inclined to doubt agreements. I used to be a district attorney. The officials don't ordinarily make agreements because the officials have a job to do and have to be free to do it as they see fit. But when Mr. DeGuerin makes that representation, I think we'll ask that.
Also, Mr. DeGuerin said it was poorly planned, poorly conceived, poorly executed. Who takes responsibility for that?
Well, we'll have to ask questions and find out who made all those decisions. I'm not prepared at this moment to rush to judgment and to criticize anyone. What I'm really concerned about is what happens in the future. We live in a very, very dangerous world. I mean, the tragedy is just enormous. We've already seen that. But the question is, we had the bombing of the World Trade Center. We had difficult problems in Philadelphia with the MOVE incident. We face problems with cults from time to time in various places. And we could face this situation tomorrow. And we really have to be prepared for it. And if the preliminary reports are accurate that the invasive action was taken because there was a sense of being tired by the federal authorities, we have to question that kind of a judgment. There are others who could have done it, military people, perhaps people from state governments, and we have to be prepared for what's going to happen tomorrow. That's the fundamental point that I see. And what happened yesterday is a tragedy, and we have to lament it, but let's find out what happened and prepare for the future.
Attorney General Janet Reno said that she took full responsibility, said that she welcomes an investigation, and she was not into spin stuff. And by that, I imagine she means if there could be some political fallout from this. Do you suppose there could be?
Well, starting with the first point, the Attorney General took responsibility. I think she did the right thing. I think it is her responsibility. There'll be some questions as to what involvement others had, but I think it's right for her to take the responsibility, win, lose, or draw. That's what she's there for. Will there be political fallout? I think there has already been political fallout, but I think the political fallout up to now has been premature. The editorialists and even the news writers, sometimes even television, like to come to prompt judgments because of the news value. This matter is not going to be at the top of CNN 9 o'clock news tomorrow or the day after. But in the Senate Judiciary Committee, we have to plan for how we're going to spend our money and what we're going to do. And I think there's likely to be some political fallout, but I want to wait to see what the facts are before I come to any conclusions.
Well, Attorney General did make that point, I think, that you're making, Senator Specter, when she said we did the best that we could, or words to that effect, without the benefit of hindsight.
Well, we all know how easy Monday morning quarterbacking is. But right now, we are 24 hours away and less than that from many of the events. And when you see so much comment by the media already of a critical, condemnatory nature, I just think that is too soon. We really need to know what facts the Attorney General had. We need to know what the assessment was of the personalities in the cult which they had. We need to know what authorities they conferred with. We need to know why they didn't have fire apparatus standing by. We already had the MOVE incident on Osage Avenue in Philadelphia in 1985 to know that you have to be prepared for an eventuality like a fire. These are just some of the questions. And when Attorney General Reno comes into a hearing and she's asked questions by members of the committee, other questions will come up and we will learn a lot more about the incident. There's plenty of time yet to affix blame, but most fundamentally, we have to figure out how to do it better for the future.
Koresh's mother, Bonnie Haldeman, lashed out at the FBI and said that there were law-abiding, God-fearing people in there. They did not hurt anybody. It's ridiculous. They're going to pay. What kind of satisfaction do you think that she might get after the investigations or the questions that she will want answered?
Well, I can understand her anguish and her dread and her unhappiness over what has happened. She's a mother. I'm a father. I can understand that, and I would expect her to respond in that way. The editorial writers, the news critics, others, I would just wish they'd wait a little bit. She'll have an opportunity to assert any claim she has. She's represented by counsel, and I think she can make her point.
Our thanks to you, Senator Arlen
Nice being
Specter
with you.
from Pennsylvania. Thanks so much for joining us. Bob?
Coming up next, the families and friends of Branch Davidian cult members, along with the rest of us, watched the building burn yesterday.
The market's closed. The traders have all gone home. But as Wall Street sleeps, the trading day in Asia is about to begin. And then the great money centers of Europe will awaken, and we'll start the cycle all over again. All driven by dollars, Deutschmarks, and yen. The power behind a global economic force that affects each and every one of us.
Moneyline with Lou Dobbs, weeknights, and business news throughout the day on CNN.
Morning news continues, followed in 1 hour by Living in the 90s. After this word from your local cable operator, next on CNN.
Who made this lawn a star? Lawn Doctor. Now you can make your lawn a star with your choice of Lawn Doctor's proven time-tested lawn care or their new 100% all-natural fertilization program. Lawn Doctor always delivers environment-supporting care and the rich, thick, healthy lawn you want. Lawn Doctor. Nobody does it better. Naturally.
Here on Nostalgia Television, we're turning back the clock to recall the greatest moments in music, TV, pop culture, as I talk to the history makers themselves in a brand new program called Remember.
There's too much, Tom, anger.
Who's asking?
Me. I'm asking you. Too much.
Don't get
me
sore, Roy. Hi, I'm Roy Firestone. I invite you to sit back and think back to those good old days right here on Remember. And it's only on Nostalgia TV.
Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on Nostalgia Television.
This is CNN.
It is now 1:30. Terry Keenan is at the New York Stock Exchange, and she has news for us. Terry.
Thanks, Bob. Good morning. Big Blue is still in the red. IBM reporting this morning that it lost $285 million in the first quarter of this year. The world's largest computer maker blames the loss on poor sales of its mainframe computers. IBM says total hardware sales were off more than 19%. IBM's new chairman, Louis Gerstner, says the company will aggressively seek ways to improve profitability. The latest news out on the state of the U.S. economy is less than encouraging. A harsh winter depressed housing construction last month. Housing starts plunged 4.6%, falling to their lowest level in nearly a year. At the same time, building permits, an indicator of future activity, tumbled nearly 9%. That's the biggest monthly drop in nearly 3 years. The bond market, however, expecting that poor news. The Treasury's 30-year bellwether bond down just about 1/4 of a point in price, the yield up to 6.73%. The U.S. dollar is continuing its fall against the Japanese yen this morning. Comments from the governor of Japan's central bank that President Clinton does not really want a stronger yen are doing little to boost the U.S. dollar. Right now, the dollar's down 1/3 of a yen at the 110.65 level. The dollar also falling against major European currencies as well. Time now to see how Wall Street is starting off the trading day. Yesterday, the Dow snapped a 5-session winning streak, falling 11 points. Early going today, the Dow is in the minus column again. And that is the latest in business news. I'm Terry Keenan, live at the New York Stock Exchange.
How many times I told my dad to see a doctor. He was stubborn. But the pain in his stomach just wouldn't go away. He had to go. You should have seen the relief on his face when the doctor said Mylanta. He said it was indigestion, and his kind of indigestion needed strong medicine.
Mylanta is strong medicine, strongly recommended. In fact, Mylanta is the antacid doctors recommend most.
My doctor said Mylanta.
Also available in tablets and new gel caps.
Traffic, what are you gonna do? You know,
Last week I took my boys, Jakey and Sam. Oh, wait a minute, I got a picture of them. Here they are. Jakey and Sammy, what a pair. They cracked me up.
Of all the words of wisdom you'll hear in New York City, none is more important than these. Stay at a hotel within walking distance of your business meeting. Marriott has a hotel located on the East Side, West Side, and Wall Street. End of lecture.
Should your copier ever go down, remember, there's one part that never stops working. This one. It guarantees service under any condition. For more in-depth information, call 1-800-852-2679. That's 1-800-852-2679.
NBA Thursday on TNT. Phoenix and Portland. Two powerful teams evenly matched except for one difference. The well-behaved Charles Barkley. Suns Blazers Thursday at 8 on TNT.
Around the world, the families and friends of Branch Davidian cult members watched in horror as the Texas compound went up in flames. CNN's Kathy Marshall has more in this report.
They were watching in Melbourne, Australia, Manchester, England, and Los Angeles. Relatives and former cult members.
It's very hard to know that they're dying right before your eyes.
Debbie Bonds was born in Waco and spent 20 years with the Branch Davidians before leaving the cult and moving to California. She's hurt and angry.
He got to decide his own death, when and how and why, and those children did not. And that's what I'm angry about.
In Melbourne, former cult members Elizabeth Bernier and Mark Bro watched helplessly.
You watch the thing burning, and I was sort of detached this morning because I realized that all of our friends were gone. You know, and all the years that we've been spending trying to get them out just went up in smoke, you know, literally.
So there'll be no excuses. They think the FBI did what was necessary, but that Koresh never intended to surrender.
There's no doubt about that. They've been planning this for years. He'd been instilling it into their minds for quite some time now. And the upshot of it is that they believe that through their death, that they will not be dead for a long time. They believe that they will be resurrected, and then God, you know, Jesus Christ will come back, and they will be resurrected and destroy the wicked.
Graham Craddock's parents watched in horror, then joy, as they learned their son was one of the few to escape the fire. They also agreed with the FBI's actions.
He thinks he's Christ or the Son of God, but in my understanding that he's the son of Satan. There's no way that they will escape that.
Samuel Henry's wife and 5 children were in the compound.
I just can't understand how my family got themselves involved with this, in this thing. I just can't understand it.
Like the others, he says he knew David Koresh was evil, and he says he warned the FBI of disaster.
They should have anticipated what this man would do. They should. Not even one was there on alert. Oh, God.
Kathy Marshall, CNN, reporting.
While federal agents begin searching the rubble of the compound, experts provide some clues to what might have gone on inside. Joining us this morning, Dr. James Gordon, a psychiatrist and author of several articles on religious cults. Good morning, Dr. Gordon.
Good morning.
How tough is it to predict what a cult leader and followers will do?
Well, I don't know that we can always predict what anybody will do, let alone a leader of a cult. But I think what we can do is have a sense of why people do the things they do. And the first thing we need to do is to take seriously what they say. And I think sometimes we dismiss what leaders of these groups say as crazy because it doesn't make any sense to us.
But what if what they say changes?
Well, it's always going to change. I think we have to hear the message that's continual as well as the changes that are being rung. I think the important thing to see is that the message does make sense to the people who come to them, to the people who become their followers, that there is a grain of truth in it to the followers, and that it holds them together, and it behooves us to understand that.
You say continual messages. Did you hear some continual messages from David Koresh?
Well, I've studied a number of groups over the years. I did not know the Branch Davidians, and so all that I heard was since the siege began in February. And there were mixed messages, but certainly one of the continual ones was about the possibility or perhaps the inevitability of the world coming to an end in a conflagration. And if you read the book of Revelations, it's right there. And I think that what we needed to do was to understand that he was serious about that possibility and that it was certainly not impossible that he would help to bring that about.
Although we did hear that they were assured, federal authorities were assured that suicide was not an option. If you're assured, then what do you do in that case?
Well, I think what you have to understand with these groups is you cannot close off the other options to them. One of the things that troubled me throughout, and I think that we really need to think about for the future, not to lay blame now, but to think about the future, is if in these groups